be a good time to buy a business as well, because the value of a travel business is going to be significantly lower now than it would have been 3 years ago. So I've done a lot of mergers and acquisitions over the years. In fact, I was working on 3 deals pre-COVID, which all got put on hold because it's very difficult to value a travel business during a global pandemic, right? Whereas now, coming out of that, there will be opportunities.
So today I've got joining me the great Jeannette Linfoot. Now, I've known Jeanette a while. I've been on her podcast, which is extremely successful, one of the top 1% in the world, I think, Jeanette, right?
Top 1.5%, but we're going to get to 1%, Matt.
You're nearly there. Brave, bold and brilliant, and it really is too. Now, I thought I'd have a successful female entrepreneur on, and Jeanette is exactly that in the corporate world. So rather than me doing a big intro, I'm going to get Jeanette to introduce herself and where she's come from a big level, from running literally businesses with $500 million turnover, many countries of the world. She's very well traveled, to say the least. Actually, she, for a friend of hers or for a client, she organized my last holiday. And in times like this, there's so much I think we can all learn from Jeanette in the property world. The problems with inflation and interest rates going up. She's been there, done it, and she's mixing with all the right people who are at a huge level of success, and can give us a little bit of an insight on what she thinks is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, where you should invest your money, and what's going to happen with the travel industry, which is kind of a strange one. So I just recently came on holiday, and it was a bit of a struggle to get out there and get back. It's not back to normal like it should be. And the summer holidays are approaching soon. It'd be interesting to see how that's going to approach. So, Jeanette, can we go back to your background? Because I know you're one of many sisters, and you're kind of the odd one out with this crazy ambition and drive. So how did it all start with you right from the beginning?
Yeah. Oh, listen, Matt. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really delighted to be on your amazing new podcast. That's great. So I grew up in Manchester, from a very working class family, but a family full of love. And, mum and dad were fantastic. And I was the youngest of 3 daughters. So my dad used to call us the Knicker Brigade when we were growing up. So you can imagine he was surrounded by bloody women. So I had a very happy childhood. We didn't want for anything, but we weren't particularly affluent at all. My dad was a plumber, mum was a secretary. So it was just a very normal, happy family life, really, growing up in Manchester. And I guess I always knew that I was a bit of the black sheep. I was sort of had this drive and ambition to explore the world, I suppose, and to actually make something of myself. So, my sisters, they all stayed local in Manchester and got married quite young and had their kids, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's not about being better or worse, just different, really. So I went off to university, the first one in the family, the only one in the family at the time to go to uni. So I studied economics at Leeds, came away with a first, which was great. And then I graduated in 93. So I'm showing my age now. And it was a recession, massive recession in 93. And I was applying for hundreds of jobs, Matt, hundreds. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I even got rejected by Rugby Cement. Even they didn't want me. But essentially, I ended up getting a first proper job as a government economist. So I moved to London and I was working in Whitehall for a couple of years. And then I jumped into the travel industry. And that's kind of been my passion, really, for for a big chunk of my career. And I worked my way up from the bottom to ultimately becoming the CEO of the travel division for Saga. And before that, I was the managing director of the emerging markets for TUI. So I bought and ran businesses in China, India, Brazil, Russia, Ukraine for TUI. So awful to see what's going on there right now over there. And then about 3 years ago, I jumped out essentially to become an entrepreneur. So I've now got 3 businesses. One is property investing. The second one is my mentoring business, where I work intensely one-to-one with either senior execs or business leaders to help them scale up. And then the third business I have is my advisory business. So I will go into organizations and help review their strategy, their business plan, how they want to grow, and had quite a range of clients, both in the travel space, but also financial services. I've done quite a lot with the Nationwide Building Society, etc. So I guess in a nutshell, I'm a working class girl that's kind of worked her way up from scratch, from nothing, to becoming that corporate CEO, but now an entrepreneur. So that's me in a nutshell, Matt, really.
Well, I can tell you've done lots of podcast interviews, Jeanette, because you've answered about 20 of my questions there in a few minutes. Great intro. So let's just jump right into the controversy that's around the holidays and the situation at the moment, because you've seen a recession before. I was fairly young back then. So I do remember my parents struggling to pay the mortgage. I think it was 1989 to 92, 93, something like that. And us having to relocate, downsize the houses and things. Now, there's all this big talk about us entering recession now. And I do remember too, holidays were on like payment plans, if I remember rightly, back then. Pretty sure. And so what do you feel is going to happen currently? So we've just been on holiday, we've just come back. It went well, with chaos at the airports. One of the particular companies you mentioned there that you work for were in a bit of bother at the time with having to let people go home and cancel holidays. They just couldn't seem to cope with it. So in the last recession, does that reflect what's going on now? Or is this completely uncharted territory from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the circumstances are very different, because we've just come out of a global pandemic, right? And to a certain extent, still feeling the impacts of that. So the travel industry, I would say, has been the industry that was hit the hardest through that entire period. Because, of course, we had all the change in regulations, the amber, red, green list, and all of the, the different kind of restrictions and from a health point of view. So you can imagine the absolute bottom fell out the market from a travel point of view. And, you've pretty much had 2 years with zero income. But at the same time, most travel businesses have still had to deal with customers, changing bookings, still actually being, it's not a case of they could take all of the overhead out of the business and not need people. So it's been a really difficult time for the industry. And it's very unfortunate that now we should be having like the best summer ever. But what is happening in reality is that, because the industry got no dedicated support, and I don't want to get into a big political discussion about it, but there was no dedicated support. So therefore, businesses had to, get rid of a certain amount of overhead, which normally relates to people. So then all of a sudden, when, literally overnight, it's like, come on, everyone can travel again. It's almost impossible as a travel business or an airline or an airport to ramp up and get the staff to be able to service, those flights and those customers. Plus, we've also got, on the back of Brexit, around about 20% of the typical person that would do those type of jobs and as not available. They're not in the market. So you've got 20% less people. You've got people that have left the industry and aren't coming back. And yet you've got this immediate, ramp up during the busiest time of the year. So, it's a really difficult scenario from a consumer point of view. If you've had a holiday cancelled or you've been at the airport and your flight's not departed, of course, that's a terrible situation. I mean, there's no doubt about it. However, it's complex, it's not so straightforward. And I think I was with EasyJet the other week, actually, and I think they've had quite a lot of coverage around. I think they had 60 flights in a day that they had to cancel, but they operate over 3,500 flights a day. So, of course, 60 flights is still a lot of flights, but in the context of the whole operation, as a percentage, it's, but the press don't report that, do they? They just report the headline messages. And of course, it's not to underplay the situation with those customers that have been affected at all. But I mean, it will gradually get back. They're actually reducing capacity so that they can service the guests. But people want to get away. We've had 2 years of being unable to travel. So there's an appetite to travel. But there's a lot going on as well around inflation, fuel cost, all of which pent up demand, capacity reductions, all of which is kind of colliding at the same time, Matt. So, there's a lot of complexity going on, but it will get easier. But people just really have to, I suppose, keep themselves in contact with their travel provider, and actually have the confidence to travel, but appreciate that there are some of these operational complexities to get to the airport early, things like that you can make it a little bit easier for yourself. But yeah, it's tough.
That's good advice. That brings me on to the next thing. So we saw a big boom in, which I never thought would be imaginable, the staycation, or people finding beauty spots of the UK, realizing they can have a great holiday here. They don't have to be off in the sun and save a lot of money. And of course, that had a reflection on the prices for just renting a lodge. You could look at 2,000 to 3,000 a week in Cornwall, if you can get one. So the staycation, so I've got some friends who've made literally millions over the last few years from the staycation boom. So is that here to stay, Jeanette, or do you think that's going to die off? Because we're facing, I don't want to make this like time where like I want to try and keep this evergreen, but we are facing the summer holidays. I think it's going to be complete carnage in terms of getting out of the country personally, judging by just experiencing what I experienced at a half term, trying to get away with my family, the 6-week holiday break where everyone's moved their holidays back and back and back, the lack of staff. And we was at a resort, and the simple problems they had was simply because we were in Crete, in Greece, Greek island. They were running at 150 staff short of what they normally go, and they couldn't get any staff. No matter what they do, they just can't get staff. Plus they were missing the Russian business, which is huge to them, having a knock-on effect. So this year alone, so we're talking about 2022, I guess staycation is going to be massive, but is it going to be here to stay? Or this Airbnb thing has just come out of nowhere, hasn't it? It's massive. Like when I go to London now, you try and think, well, what's the point of spending £400 or £500 a night in a hotel when I can have a nice apartment with 3 or 4 bedrooms with a family up there with me? What's your predictions on that? Where's that going to go? Is that here to stay? Is it going to fade away, get regulated?
Yeah, I mean, I think the domestic travel has definitely had a real boom, as you say, because people have all shifted to domestic holidays. So, I mean, I think that at least the next couple of years, there's still going to be increasing. And of course, if there's a lack of supply, then that means the prices go up, right? So if you're actually looking to get a cottage or something down in Mumbles, where I am, or, down in Devon or Cornwall, you're going to see an increase in prices for sure, I would say. But I think the reality is, Matt, that people want experiences, whether that's overseas or whether it's domestically. And what I'm seeing a lot of is intergenerational travel. So, if you think about grandparents, mum, dad, kids, actually being able to get accommodation where you can sort of stay together, maybe in one property, domestically, that's probably a lot easier to do that than necessarily going overseas. So I think that will continue in terms of a trend, intergenerational family travel, which plays very strongly for domestic. I think we will see a natural sort of a little bit of a slowdown when we're getting into 2024, but more of a leveling out. But I think domestic travel is still here to stay. And if anything, actually, the last couple of years, people have realized that there's some beautiful places in the UK to go to. It doesn't necessarily replace their main family holiday overseas, but it could be in addition to. So I still see that there'll be growth in that serviced accommodation area. You mentioned Airbnb, actually, and I mean, Airbnb, has been a huge success. I mean, a disruptor in the travel industry for sure, and is now very much mainstream. But I think we'll start to see more regulation coming in for serviced accommodation. And, and in our property business, as you know, Matt, we're actually investing in luxury serviced accommodation business ourselves down here in Mumbles, on the edge of the Gower in South Wales. So, I think there will be more regulation come in because, my background in the travel industry, if you're a hotel operating, what you have to comply with in terms of health and safety, balcony heights, smoke detectors, markings around the pool, I mean, you name it, it's very extensive. Whereas serviced accommodation, there's none of that, actually. So I think that will change.
We had that with HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, in the early 2000s. We could do what we want. And then suddenly we got slammed with fire regs. If there's more than 2 floors and you've got to have a license every 5 years and they're inspected. Yeah, it's going to have to come, Jeanette, isn't it? Because at the moment, I mean, is there fire regs for Airbnb or anything like that? Is there nothing at all?
Nothing really. I mean, I obviously as a landlord, or some people are just renting out a room in their house. You've got to remember, Airbnb started, people renting their sofa. That's where the business started. So it's moved on significantly from there. But I'm not saying that there aren't good providers of serviced accommodation. There absolutely are. And you should be doing everything correctly in terms of fire and safety, etc. But it's not particularly enforced, and I think that's the difference. So it might even, unfortunately, take some form of fatality or an unfortunate situation to happen that kind of raises the profile of it before there is actual change and more regulation. But it'll be interesting to see. I just think as a property investor, you need to do things in the right way anyway. But I think for a lot of people, it might take some people out of the market. And of course, if you own service accommodation in your own name, you can still offset the interest in terms of a tax point of view, which obviously has changed for buy-to-let. So that's why a lot of landlords now are getting out of buy-to-lets if they own them in their own names or buying them under a limited company. So it will be interesting to see what happens from a tax point of view as well, Matt, to be honest.
So let's go back to the property side, because I know you are a big fan of property, so am I. Does it still work, Jeanette, doing the 2 up, 2 down standard buy-to-let first investment property? Does that model still work in your eyes? Would you still advise your clients when you mentor them to start off with a 2 up, 2 down terraced house with maybe £150, £200, profit between the mortgage, interest only mortgage and the rent? And then obviously we've got the taxation issue there, which you can not get around. You can legally do it for a company, can't you, at the moment, unless that changes. So what would you say to someone who's looking to invest? Because for me, property is the number one. We'll get onto service accommodation again in a second, because I think the way you're doing it is you're preparing yourself for all the regulations. You're going luxury. So if it hits you, you're not going to be bothered because you're already there. So I imagine you'll have all the fire doors in place and everything imaginable. So if you're advising someone now who's wants to invest, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there very cash rich at the minute, had a lot of support in COVID, unlike the travel sector, and are experiencing this massive boom. Where would they start? Where do you feel the property market is going? Because at the minute, you've seen all the emails going out from all the advisors, a lot of our mutual friends as well, must I add, about the crash is coming, the recession, the correction, or the depression. What's your honest thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone that wants to get into property for the first time, I would always get them to really think about what is it they're trying to achieve, because that's really where you need to start. And then depending what that is, the strategy or the approach or what you actually invest in should really fit with what you're trying to achieve. So if the objective is to replace your income very fast and to have a high cash flowing strategy, then you're probably not going to go down the buy-to-let route. You might go down more of a serviced accommodation route, because that's a higher cash flowing strategy. If what you want to achieve, for example, is you kind of just want to have something that's less volatile, doesn't involve so much time and effort. Once it's set up, it's kind of there, it ticks over, you've got the equity growth over time. You're not looking to really, replace a big chunk of cash in one go. Then buy-to-lets can work quite nicely. So I think it has to come back to what are you trying to achieve and what's your personal situation. I mean, we have buy-to-lets, in our portfolio. We've got properties in our own names. We've got properties in a company as well. And I would say if you're going to go into buy-to-lets, do it under a limited company, because you can offset the interest cost. So that's important. But really, it depends. I mean, the prices in the market have been absolutely crackers. I mean, even in Manchester, where we've got quite a few of our buy-to-lets, I mean, the prices are just ridiculous. In the last couple of years, we thought there'd be a drop, and there hasn't been a drop. So I guess the numbers, the days of managing to get all your money out of a buy-to-let deal are fewer and far between, I would say. But it still is quite a good strategy to cut your teeth on as well, because it's lower investment risk. You can learn a lot. You're not necessarily going to keep you in Gucci handbags for the rest of your life, but it can get you going in a relatively lower risk way than doing something bigger that's riskier. But yeah, I think it's hard to get those amazing deals that you used to get years ago, where you could buy a house for 20 grand and, that's long gone, in my opinion.
And the no money down strategies, you think they work anymore? The mortgage companies just don't like them anymore, do they? I think they throw them out. Most of my properties I bought with no money down. Actually, I would get cash back on a day of completion with some of them, get paid for buying the house. But I don't see, I mean, you'd have to be very technical on that, but I don't see that's as easy as it was in the early 2000s and towards the end there. So I think for my strategy now, I just go for blocks of flats where I own the freehold and service accommodation side of things, because for me, income combined with capital, you just can't really go wrong. And the interest part, I think there is a way around, Jeanette, isn't there? Though you can still own your personal name, but have a trustee back to a company, can't you? And legally offset the tax.
I believe so, but God, I wouldn't want to give advice on that. But yes,
financial advice on that one.
But you make a very valid point, actually, because having a really good tax accountant that understands is critical. I mean, it's critical anyway, but not all accountants are the same, for sure. And, you know, obviously we have to do everything above board, everything legally, and no one's talking about doing anything dodgy here. But there are ways that you can set yourself up to optimize your tax position in line with your overall personal scenario, etc. So, I mean, my advice to anyone would be, you know, do your due diligence if you're changing accountants, and get someone that really understands their stuff, that's, you know, a referral. I mean, our accountant, we actually have a gentleman, I don't mind giving him a shout out, is Chris Wilkins, and he was recommended to us by Mark Homer. He's incredible, he really is, and he's excellent. So it doesn't have to be him, but do your due diligence, make sure you get people on your team that are the experts in their field. And if you end up paying a bit more for their services, then you're paying for quality, and it will save you absolutely thousands and thousands overall anyway. So yeah, I think that's a key part really, where anyone getting into property or business actually.
How do you feel about HMOs? Because I see we went for a cycle with these where I had 86 rooms, and the last recession actually, we couldn't let them fast enough. And then by about 2014, I started making them family homes again. And we still have the HMOs, some HMOs now, but we're starting to see the demand again now. And literally, my agent said, if I give them 50 more rooms tomorrow, they'll be let within an hour. The demand is unbelievable. But they are high maintenance, high turnover on especially the energy costs. I know you can have all these gadgets where you can control the heating and stuff and things like that, but they are costly to run. But have you dipped your toe in that arena, Jeanette?
No, we did have a look at it, Matt, to be honest. We at one point we were thinking we were going to go down that route, and actually what we've ended up doing is deciding to go for serviced accommodation, because that brings together our expertise in property and also travel, right? So it's a perfect strategy for us doing that. But yeah, I mean, we did look at it. I mean, I think it's an interesting area, isn't it? Because if you think about, you know, someone wanting to maybe leave home, you know, and don't want to live with their parents anymore. It's difficult these days for young people to get a foot on the ladder, isn't it? But you don't necessarily want to be in a shared house, like, you know, bunking in with your mates. So I guess HMO it's sort of quite a cost-effective way of having that independence and living on your own in your own room. And most of them now, you know, very often are en suite and are actually done to a good standard. Yeah, so I think actually I can see the demand continuing, but I think what we'll start to see, Matt, is that maybe some of the lower quality HMOs that maybe was where the market was, you know, 10 years ago, you know, needing to up their game to actually compete with the, you know, people that are coming in doing it now, because they've raised the bar, haven't they, in terms of what's acceptable. So I think we'll start to see that should help the overall sector actually, just in terms of quality and getting rid of it's not got the best reputation from many years ago, HMOs, whereas now I think the world is quite different, but there's still a bit of that baggage of reputation.
Like a bedsit type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and it's so different from that now, isn't it? But that's still a little bit of a legacy perception that I think just needs to be kind of thrown away. But it will only happen if you up the quality of the lower end of the market. So I still think it's a great strategy. As you say, you know, it's higher cash flowing, a bit more time consuming. But you can, of course, get people to manage it for you, can't you? You know,
yeah. You get agents don't like it, but if you get a good agent who's willing to take it on. And with me, we went in luxury right from the start. And they had Sky TV, broadband, and cleaners twice a week, leather sofas, TV in every room. But now, now they would expect en suites. I've got a friend who does that, does extremely well. Unbelievable. You never believe it was the HMO from the outside. And it is, the game's really improved on that one. So interest rates, Jeanette, what's your predictions on that? Are we going to see, for me, I look at the country as county by county. I'm in Devon currently, and I don't think we're going to be too affected, Devon and Cornwall, because the most clicked on area in Rightmove, the property search places for people to live, because now they've learned they can work from home. Londoners can buy, if they have £1 million flat up there, or £2 million flat, which is tiny, you're lucky to get a two-bed flat in London for that, of a decent standard. You could have a mansion down here for that. If you can find a house that's worth 2 million, that is. You're in a similar position where you are actually in Wales there. What's your feeling on, is there going to be a house pricing crash? And are you looking at selling properties, or are you going to hold it through?
Yeah, so, well, I think interest rates are going to go up. I mean, we've got a big problem with inflation, haven't we? And all of the indication is that we're going to be heading into a recession. So, you know, if you think about the macroeconomic tools available to government, you know, interest rates is the main tool that can be used to control inflation. So I think we're going to see interest rates increase. That actually doesn't really concern me, because, you know, I remember back in the 80s and 90s when interest rates were 12-15%. You know, they're still relatively low. Actually, if you think about it, you still have access to capital at a pretty low level of cost of borrowing still. But obviously, a lot of people have been used to paying their mortgage at a certain level. Interest rates, I think, will go up. I think we will head into a recession. And I think what we'll see is, you know, your average person will feel the pinch. You know, we've got cost of fuel, you know, food going up. We've got, you know, if you look at even, you know, we're nearly at £2 a litre for diesel, you know, and petrol. I mean, to fill the car, it's, as an average car, is over £100 now, you know, and inflation last month, 9.1%. So, you know, and the actual forecast is that in the next couple of months, it's going to be double digits, it's going to be 11%. So, you know, there's a lot of pressure points coming that's going to impact people. It is, for sure. So, you know, unfortunately, I think what that will mean is some people will need to sell a property. Maybe they will have to kind of come out of being a homeowner and going into rental. So I think we will see a slowing of prices. I don't know if we'll have a massive big crash, to be honest, Matt, but I think we'll definitely see a cooling down. We're not going to be seeing the big increases. And I can see it here, even in Mumbles, even in just probably the last 4 weeks or so. You know, properties are now starting to have to reduce the prices ever so slightly, whereas before you weren't seeing that at all. So I think there'll be more stock coming on the market. I think prices will come down. As to whether there'll be a massive crash like in 2007, 2008, I'm not so sure, but I think it's going to be a better environment if you are acquisitive and you want to buy property. It's probably going to be quite a good time. And interest rates, when you're looking at that, you just have to bake it into your numbers. You know, you just have to assume that it's going to be at a certain level, and then you know, you can kind of then look at the deal and say, do the numbers work or do they not work? So I think it's going to be an interesting sort of next 12 to 18 months. But there's a lot of forces happening which are global and are not just UK related. And that's the challenge, because how do you control, you know, the war in Ukraine and the impact on oil supply? You can't control that as a UK government. You know, you have to respond, but you can't control it. So it's quite different. Whereas the crash in 2007 was really down to subprime lending in the US that then came across the Atlantic, wasn't it? It's a different issues, different scenario.
Yeah, you can't worry about things you can't control, and that's one thing we got no control over. Like you said, you just got to address your situation and make the deal work, and then go back to the person who's selling and make it. I mean, that's what might bring the properties down. And you're right, there's a lack of stock out there, isn't there? We're constantly looking for investments, but there's very few and far between. And if you want to be solidly proof, then you've got to go income. That's the only way you can push yourself through that. So I'm going to be a bit selfish and ask you a question while I got you here, Jeanette. So we've got this big house I'm in now in Devon. So we renovated it. So it's 6 double bedrooms. So we have the north coast that way, south coast of Devon that way, London 2 hours on the train. And I want to make this service accommodation. So what standard do I take it to? Do I put a cinema in? We've got a living room. We've got a massive extra room, which we're calling a cinema room, but might not end up there. We've got incredible views all over the country, like hot tubs and stuff like that. We've got a land, there's enough land for them to want, but not be too much to maintain. So they've got all the beaches around them and so on. So I think it's in a good position. And because we want to live abroad, and because I could pretty much do whatever I do abroad now, flying for my events. I mean, I can't keep track of you. You're all over the place as well. So what advice would you give to someone who wanted to do service accommodation right, like you are now? So basically tell me all your secrets so I can do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think given where you're in a great spot, and a lot of what you just talked about there is not dissimilar to the location that we're in here in terms of place of natural beauty, great beaches. So it's the perfect spot, isn't it, for actually people wanting to have a very...
You're opposite me. If I look out my window, we're just over the hill.
Yeah, exactly.
Half an hour on a boat to Milford.
We'll have to get the yacht out, Matt, and meet in the middle somewhere. But yeah, so I think you're in a really great location. So that's a massive tick, isn't it? Straight away. I mean, this is originally your home, right? But obviously, you're gonna move, so maybe you become less attached to it anyway. But I would say, don't scrimp on the finish. I would go for the luxury end of the market because, one, it sets you apart from the competition. 2, you're going to be able to charge a premium. There's a lack of stock anyway. So, and the other thing I would say with a property of the size that you've got, 6 double bedrooms, there aren't that many of them. So, if there's a special occasion or, like I said, multi-generational families, you'll probably find if you do a search for that type of accommodation locally to you, there'll probably be hardly anything that comes up. So again, supply and demand, that's going to allow you to really charge a premium. So I would go for a really nice, luxury finish. You want the hot tubs and all of that, quality bedding, as you would expect if you were staying in a 5-star hotel. That's what you need. But also the other thing that we're actually looking at is, being able to, get the chef to come in and cook for the family and to do the cocktail parties and to have the spa treatments actually delivered in the property. So you make it a whole experience.
Stealing that idea. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant idea.
That's what I would do. That's what I would do, Matt.
So I got this other big room. We were going to put a gym in there. But I'm better off. Do you think I'm better off putting a big snooker table, make it a games room?
Maybe.
Do you see service accommodation with gyms in it? Or who goes on holiday to train? I know people like us do, but we're a bit strange. But if you go on a holiday, so we've got this huge room we built to have a gym. But now we're actually not going to live here. And you're right, it's our home, but it'd be like a backup home to return to should we not like it wherever we're going to go. So. But for somebody going on holiday, they're going to prefer a games room, I think, over a gym, aren't they? Fully equipped gym.
I would have thought you could make it sort of a whole entertainment area, couldn't you, depending on the size of it? Yeah. So you could do it so that, if it's like cinema night, with popcorn and all the rest of it, they've got that, but they've got you've got the games and everything. Because also, don't forget, families want quality time together. They want to do fun stuff together, don't they? So if you've got a room like that, or the kids want to just kind of hang out and have it as a bit of a den, so I would go down that route. I mean, depending on the size of the property, you could always put a little gym in the garden or something, couldn't you, if you really wanted to? But you're right, in terms of actually being used by more people, it's going to have a broader appeal if you do that with it, I would say.
Especially when in England, we mostly get wet weather. And that's the other thing with service accommodation too. A lot of the time, they don't spend a lot of time in it, do they? Because they want to be out and about, exploring the beaches and going on walks and visit the entertainment areas. But yeah, okay, I'll take note of that. I like the chef idea. I think that's fantastic. And the spa treatments coming to the house and all the other things you can offer. That's really, really important. So
Yeah.
let's talk about social media now, because I think that's the other thing which you really smash out in the park on, Jeanette. Because I first saw you on Clubhouse, and I got to be honest, you're advising people, keeping them positive about the travel industry, and no one ever thought it was going to come back. And you were there very positive, weren't you, at the time? It was going to happen and so on. So if you're starting out in business now and you want to be an entrepreneur, break away from your job, I think the travel sector is probably a damn good thing to get into, to be honest with you. If you're like the next TUI, you're going to make it because the demand is there. And if you get it right, so if you're mentoring somebody now who wanted to get, say, into the travel sector, what would you suggest them to do? What social media platforms would you favor to get them following quicker and so on? Because Clubhouse, I pulled away from a little bit because I just felt that it was, a bit of a distraction. It was great for the lockdown, so we made a lot of connections between us all. But for me, number one is still Facebook, without a doubt. But what do you find? What works best for you for what you do? And for service accommodation, where do you think that's going to go? Where are people going to search for that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was quite a lot in there, Matt. So let me just kind of break it down a little bit. So I think in terms of anyone that wants to maybe leave their job and become an entrepreneur and put themselves out, social media is essential. So regardless of travel, I'll answer the travel part in a minute. But I think, I used to be very cynical about social media. I used to think it was for losers that should really go and get a proper life and actually have a conversation with people in person. So I was very negative. And also I was in a corporate job where I was, I would be presenting the annual results to the analysts in the city as a FTSE 100 business. So I couldn't, I was restricted with what I could say because it could affect the share price, right? But when I came out, I'm working with Rob as well, Rob Moore being our mentor. I started to see the power of social media. And I don't have anywhere near as big a following as you do, Matt, but certainly I think to be authentic, to put yourself out to the world, adding value, has got to be the first starting point, because one, you're helping people. Two, people get to know and like and trust you, and then they'll be more open to doing business with you, whatever it is. So I think putting yourself out on social media is absolutely right, but you can't do everything. So if you're starting out, choose where you think your tribe is hanging out, and maybe start with one platform, but be consistent. If you can only post once or twice a week, that's fine, but post once or twice a week. And then build up from there, to start doing maybe some videos and then some lives and etc. So I think social media is incredibly powerful. So definitely put yourself out there as an entrepreneur. I think in terms of travel, if someone wants to get into the travel industry, it depends in what capacity. Because, if you want to be a travel advisor, for example, well, then social media and probably Facebook and Instagram is going to be the platform where you can actually reach people, showing inspiring content, contact me to book your holiday. So those platforms can be great. If you want to go in as a business owner, where you might want to buy a travel business or start a business, then you're probably going to focus more on LinkedIn, as being the sort of where your investors maybe are hanging out. So I think it depends what you want to do. I'm passionate about the travel industry. It will come back. It's had an absolute kick in for sure. But you've got to remember that travel and tourism accounts for 10% of global GDP. It's huge. It is a huge sector. So longer term, I think it is a good bet. Now could be a good time to buy a business as well, because the value of a travel business is going to be significantly lower now than it would have been 3 years ago. So I've done a lot of mergers and acquisitions over the years. In fact, I was working on 3 deals pre-COVID, which all got put on hold because it's very difficult to value a travel business during a global pandemic, right? Whereas now, coming out of that, there will be opportunities. There will be businesses that are maybe in a slightly distressed state. And if you have a long eye, then you could really pick up some really good businesses and then scale and grow them, because the industry will come back. So I think it depends, Matt, what you're trying to achieve. But social media, very, very powerful. In respect of service accommodation, which was your last question, you have to be on all of the platforms, on the online travel agents. So for service accommodation, Airbnb, Booking, critical. But I would also say, create your own direct booking channel as well, because your average commission you're going to be paying through an Airbnb or booking is 12%, and that's fine. Sometimes it's higher, but if you can get some direct clients coming to you, build your own database, and then they start repeating with you, obviously your margins are going to be higher. So to have a balanced distribution strategy is important, and if you're in that serviced accommodation space, for sure.
That's a good idea. I never heard that done before. Your own booking site for your own service accommodation. So that brings me on nicely to my last question, which I know you're passionate about. Personal brand, how important is that? You kind of touched on it then, but how important is it? Because we've all had branding. You've worked for some, like Johnny Depp said, mega brands, I guess. I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't know how you dealt with that stress. With $500 million turnover, one company you were looking at. How many staff, Jeanette, was it?
Well, I'd say when I was at Saga, I had 1,700 staff on my team. Yeah.
How did you handle that? You sleep at night and stuff, okay? Was it fine?
Well, yeah, you just have, I mean, it's all about the people, isn't it? It doesn't matter what business you're in. It's all about your team and your people. And I think, you have to have the right organization structure. And, I was always about, and still am, about empowering people, so as a leader of a business, you're there to set the strategy, make investment choices, support the team, bring talented people in that know a lot more than you do, empower them, give them clear accountability and responsibility, set them up for success, and get out of their way. Let them do their job. And I always think you have to be like a helicopter. As a leader, you need to be up here, being able to sort of set the direction and dealing with the big clients and things like that. But you need to know when to land. So when there's an issue or something needs more support or care and attention, you land, you get involved, and then you take off again. Because the worst thing you can do if you're trying to run a big business, you can't be micromanaging. And I had teams globally. I had a team in Moscow, a team in Sao Paulo, a team in Germany, a team in Delhi. So I can only be in so many places at once. So you have to be super organized, put really good people into key positions, reward them well, and really let them fly. And when they need to remember,
we didn't have this technology available to you back then, did we? So you had to be there in person. Yes, Skype, I suppose.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I'm always a big believer in boots on the ground as well. So I used to be, when I was the MD of the emerging markets for TUI, I could be away 70% of the time. I would be flying, I'd do a 12-hour flight over to Beijing, and then I'd, 8-hour time difference, Monday to Friday. Then the next week I'd be off to Sao Paulo. So, when you're running those big businesses, it is a lifestyle choice as well. And you may have to make sacrifices, but technology is a great enabler. So yeah, I can't remember what the original question was now.
I think it was just a Skype. Let's talk about the sacrifices, because entrepreneurs don't talk about that enough. And I'm a big believer it motivates people. They can relate to you. So operating at that kind of level, traveling the world, the jet lag, away from family, friends, relationships, what are the sacrifices you've had to make to get to where you are now, to enable to do what you do now? What toll did it take on you?
A lot, actually, at the time, I would say. And this is why it's important to love what you do. Right, because when you're in the corporate world, or even if as a business owner, it doesn't not about corporate world. If you're your own boss and it's your business and your money you're investing, it's a different type of stress. It's still incredibly stressful. So I think the first thing is you have to love what you do, because too many times I think people stick in a job or relationship that maybe isn't right for them, and they're not really enjoying it. And life's too short. So I was really lucky because I always loved the roles I had. I was never one of these people or sack your boss and all that business. Not at all. I loved my corporate career. But yeah, in terms of sacrifices, I mean, we don't have kids, but Chris and I, and I have a personal relationship. We'd be like ships that pass in the night sometimes. And, there were certainly times in our relationship where we just became disconnected, and we had to kind of come back together and go, hang on a minute. We need to really, spend some quality time together, get back on track. So I'm lucky because Chris is amazing. He's such an understanding partner. I could not do what I do without him, 100%. And he had a big corporate career as well. He was running travel businesses too at the time. But I think if you're If you're passionate about what you do, you're on the same page with your partner and you've got the buy-in, then of course when you have to make those sacrifices, then you kind of can get through it. But I think also making sure that you have block quality time together is really important, you know, having the holidays, having date night, all of those things. But yeah, it's stressful. It's really stressful. You know, so I think you've just got to really dig deep and say, is this what I want to be doing with my life at this point of time? Is it rewarding me enough financially and emotionally? Is it something that I'm really passionate about? And actually, can it fit with my personal situation and life? And if the answer is yes, then great, crack on. But you're never going to achieve greatness by playing small. You know, it comes with sacrifice. Life comes with sacrifices, doesn't it? If you want mediocre and easy, then that's different, fine. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a choice. If you want the big job and the financial rewards and everything that comes with that, well, it's not going to come for free, is it? You're going to have to put the effort in. So I think you've just got to decide, is it something you really want? You know, but the other question you asked me, Matt, has just come back to me, is about personal brand. And how important is personal brand? You know, for me, it's everything, because I think whether you're a business leader, a business owner, a solopreneur, it doesn't matter what business you're in, how you carry yourself, you know, is so important. And actually, you know, personal brand, it sort of should just be the way you are, you know, your values, how you do business, how you treat your team. All of that should be around you as a person, and what you put out to the world should be consistent. And at the end of the day, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. Exactly. And your personal brand is at the heart, isn't it? Has to be.
I got to buy for you. It's gone from the big branding days, because we used to have personal branding used to be classed more like image, I think, and now it really is, because of social media and everything. They gotta like you, like what. Every time you post something out, you got to think very carefully about how that's going to be perceived, and will people buy for you? Because you're right, they're only going to buy for you if they know, like, and trust you. Otherwise, I move on to the next one. So Jeanette, just finishing off, how can people find you? Because I know you mentor people now, don't you? So what's quite the questions I was going to ask you, though. What made you get out of this big corporate role? Did you just have enough? Did you want to finally settle down?
I think I was at a time in my life, Matt, where I was sort of got to my mid-40s. Chris is 10 years older than me, so he'd actually retired. And, you know, I'd loved all of my roles. So it wasn't a position of not liking what I was doing, but I just thought, what do I want from this next stage, this next phase? You know, because it is stressful when you're running those big corporate organizations, for sure. And I suppose what I really wanted was financial freedom, choice, flexibility, to sort of be in control of my own diary, if you like. And if I wanted to spend a third of the year traveling with Chris, I wanted to be able to do that. You can't do that if you're in a corporate job. You just can't. So I think it was just the perfect time, you know, mid-40s, great corporate career behind me. And I just took some time and thought, what's important to me now? What do I want the next phase to look like? Because at that age, I think it's a perfect age. I've just turned 50, so I'm 5 years on now. But I still think it's a really good time of life, because you've got the knowledge, the experience, you're much more comfortable in your own shoes. You don't suffer fools in the same way as you do when you're starting out your career, but you still got the energy and the fire in the belly to want to make an impact. You know, so it was kind of a collision of those two things. And we decided to do more in property. And then because of my network, I was getting a lot of approaches from private equity houses saying, hey, we want to buy a business. Will you work with us on the deal? Will you advise us? So, you know, when you come out of one section or one job or career, never underestimate how transferable your skills are. And you don't just close the door on that and start something new. It sort of is an evolution. And that's sort of what happened for me, really. And yeah, so now I've got my mentoring business, the advisory business, property, the podcast, and there's opportunities everywhere. There really are. And I just love what I do. I love seeing people grow and flourish. It gives me a real sense of satisfaction. So yeah, combination of those factors really, Matt. But I would say if you're thinking about a change in your career, just give yourself a bit of headspace. you know, and do what's right for you. Don't worry about what other people think. That's just dangerous, isn't it? You know.
So what your sisters think when they look at their entrepreneurial, your sister, obsessive? I mean, I know you get up at like 4:30 in the morning, out running across the beaches and stuff. I mean,
they probably they probably think I'm totally bonkers. I mean, we're really different. We're really close, you know. But it's chalk and cheese. I think they're really proud of me, actually, and I'm really proud of them. I'm really proud of what they've achieved and the beautiful families they've created, and the kids. You know, I adore them. I'm a fabulous auntie. So I think we just respect each other's differences. And at the end of the day, I'm still that working class girl from Manchester.
Yeah, nothing changed. I think that's the question I get asked most about you. I know we've discussed this before, is that don't Jeanette ever miss not having kids? But then you said to me before, you just make the fuss out of about being an auntie. You just love that part more, don't you? You just, you know.
Yeah, and Chris and I made a conscious choice not to. You know, but it was it wasn't an easy decision. I agonized about it. I thought I would have kids, but you know, it just that wasn't the path that I took, and I did a lot of soul searching, and I don't regret my decision. But I adore kids. And I've got a wonderful family. But I wouldn't have travelled the world and had the experiences, and necessarily you can do. I should say, you know, there are some amazing working mums out there, and I'm full of admiration for those that manage to do that. But, you know, I don't regret my choices. I might do when I'm like, you know, 80, 90, sitting in my rocking chair on my own, you know, but I certainly wouldn't have swapped the experiences that I've had. And I feel very fortunate to have a lovely, lovely family that I'm close to, you know. So, yeah, it's good.
And I think when women, they have this burden on them as entrepreneurs that they have to have kids and then their career ends, don't they? Which is not really the case, is it?
No, you can have it all. You can. It's just I think we're all different. Sometimes society wants to put you in a little box, and if you don't fit into that box, people then kind of feel a bit uncomfortable. But that's normally about what's going on in their life, actually.
Yeah.
You know, I used to get some really personal questions and comments, and can't you have kids? And well, if I couldn't, then that's not a very nice thing for you to have said, is it? You know, so for God's sake, stop judging people. Just take people as they are, and everyone's different. We're all amazing and unique, aren't we? So let's just embrace that, is what I say.
Well, that's silly questions. I was on holiday, and I've done this a few times in my career, and I should learn. I said to a lady, she was chatting to me, and I thought she was pregnant. And I said, "When's the baby due?" She said, I'm not pregnant. That was just, honestly, I could have had the ground eating me up right there. But yeah, I know it's funny the way it works. But yeah, the fascination with you is, I suppose, is you're so ambitious and so driven, aren't you? And you know what you want. And the 5 a.m. club, I'm right in thinking you do all that. That you're a big believer in getting up early and exercise every day. And you go to sleep early.
I would say sometimes I burn the candle both ends, like recently with all the celebrations that we've had going on. But generally, I'm an early bird anyway. And I think it was all those years of being on flights that I can survive on sort of 5-6 hours sleep. I can function like that. So I tend to like being up before the rest of the world, because I just feel I don't know, it's just fresh, it's quiet, it's time for me. I get my training done, I do my miracle morning, my meditation, and I get my best work done early. So, you know, I try to do the most difficult, mentally taxing jobs first thing. And then, you know, by sort of 11, 12 o'clock, you've kind of done the big work, if you like, and then the rest of the day can be a lot easier. But normally 10 o'clock, I'm in bed.
Chris get up early as well then, with you?
No, he gets up a bit later. So we have a bit of a deal that I'll sort of roll out of bed as quietly as possible, and I'll come downstairs, and I always put my training kit on. I leave my training kit in the other room, so I put my training kit on as soon as I get out of bed, because then I've got no excuse to not go for a run or do something because I'm already dressed for it, right? And then I'll come downstairs, I'll make my cup of tea, I light my candle, and I spend a bit of time on my own. So I really fiercely protect that first hour of the day. And Chris will have continue just have an extra hour in bed or whatever. I mean, he doesn't stay in bed particularly long, but longer than I do. And that's kind of how we roll, So you've got to respect each other's different energy flows, haven't you?
Yeah, and it works for you now, and you made it part of your daily habits. Interesting, you got your clothes ready, and you roll straight into it, and then you're out before you can even think twice about going back to sleep again.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Because you talk yourself out of it otherwise, don't you? It's raining, Whereas for me, once I've got my kit on, no excuse, then I've got to go, no matter what.
And after the first 5 minutes, you're okay. You're in the zone, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely.
But Jeanette, how do people find you? How do people who want to be mentored by you look you up and get some advice and so on? What's the best way of contacting you?
Oh, well, all over social media. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. It's Jeannette Linfoot. Jeanette's spelled a bit weird. I've got 2 N's and 2 T's in Jeanette, so sometimes people get that wrong. I've got my podcast, Brave, Bold, Brilliant, so you can find me there. And I've got a website, Jeanette Linfoot Associates, and a YouTube channel, which is also Jeanette Linfoot. So, yeah, you can track me down anywhere. I always like to hear from people. If I can help anyone, then, that's great for me. That's why I'm here, really. So, yeah, don't hesitate.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you face to face soon. It's about time.
Yes, definitely, Matt. Let's do that. But thank you for having me on. It's been wonderful.
Thanks, Jeanette.